you are kind of a freelance writer. You mentioned writing for Guitar World or whatever magazines, and they would send you on assignment to interview different players. And one time, the first time you got to go talk to Eddie, is that how it first started to happen with your relationship?
Actually, Chris, normally that would have been the way, but it didn't quite happen that way. So I would be at the Whiskey, the famous club on the strip, at the Starwood. These amazing clubs at Troubadour. I mean, I was there a lot, man, back in the 70s. I mean, at least 2 or 3 times a week, and labels were very generous with, tabs, and you could drink and eat food. I didn't really drink, but I would bring buddies along who would drink, So I'm there at the Whiskey, July 77.
Wow.
Cheap Trick is recording a live record at the Whiskey. I thought, oh my God, Cheap Trick recording the Whiskey, that's going to be amazing. Not the huge record, not the Live at Budokan record that they, record the following year in Japan, but this is like a little promo record, I guess the label wanted. So I'm there, and I'm downstairs with my brother, and we're waiting for Cheap Trick to come on, and I feel a tap on my shoulder, and it's my good friend Michelle Meyer. Michelle Meyer booked the Whiskey. She said, listen, there's somebody upstairs you need to meet. He's Godhead. When Michelle used the term Godhead, that means this person is beyond the capacity of all human beings. It means he was a talented guy, and you have to meet him. She knew I was a guitar nerd. I was writing for, as you mentioned, Chris, guitar player at the time, and that I was, trying to meet guitar players. So she knew, any new guitar players I'd want to meet. So we go upstairs to one of the dressing rooms, and the Whiskey dressing rooms, man, are like, half cesspool, half, garbage pail, I mean, cigarettes, and they stink, but I mean, it's rock and roll, right? It's the Whiskey, it's a Sunset Strip in 77. So we walk up the stairs, and we walk in the little dressing room, and there's this guy standing in the corner. And I keep trying to remember if I actually recognized him. I had never seen Van Halen perform before meeting him, which was weird. Like I said, I've been at the Whiskey so many times at the Starwood, and they played there all the time. I had never seen him play. I had heard of Van Halen. I had seen the flyers, but there really was nothing written about him. There was no articles in any of the magazines. There really weren't a lot of photos of him, but I'm pretty sure I recognized this guy, tall, lanky guy, amazing head of hair, smoking the ubiquitous cigarette, right? So we walk over, and Michelle says, Eddie Van Halen, Steve Rosen, Eddie Van Halen, Godhead, and Edward smiles. Certainly he knew what the compliment meant. So I just met him really by being there on this random night at the Whiskey in 77. Remember, the first record won't come out until February 78. So this is before the record comes out, I believe that meeting him before that record came out, before he really blew up, had a lot to do with the relationship. I just kind of knew him as, a local kid who had done well, had signed a big deal on Warner's. But I think that had a lot to do with the tenor of the relationship. And then we just got along. We talked about Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck and Ritchie Blackmore. And the guy was just so humble and down to earth, and I said, a deal on Warner's, that's amazing. He goes, yeah, man, I think we made a good record. I hope we do okay. That's what he would say to me. I mean, if you just signed a deal on Warner's, or if I did, man, I wouldn't have been that humble about it. So yeah, it really just happened that way. And then subsequently, yes, I would hang out with him. Sometimes a label would set up the interview, but more times than not, at that point, I had his phone number. He gave me his phone number at the end of that conversation. And so he said, hey, man, call me. So basically, I would just kind of call him whenever a magazine needed an interview. So it was really that kind of a closer relationship than having to go through management or a record label to interview him.
So what was the buzz and the word on Van Halen in 77? You mentioned on the Sunset Strip debut album coming out. Could you feel the swell of the band? Was there a lot of talk about them?
There was. I mean, so they emigrated from, kind of doing the Pasadena gigs, which is a suburb about a half hour outside of LA, doing backyard parties and just drawing literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, doing like their own gigs at like the Pasadena City College, drawing like 3,000 people as unknowns just by putting up flyers and drawing people. Finally coming to the attention of the Warner Brothers bigwigs. So yeah, everybody in Hollywood really knew who they were. They were sort of the apex, predators at the top of that food chain.
Right.
Of all those LA bands, right? You had, Motley Crue came a little bit later, but they were starting to kick around, Dokken, Rat, but yeah, Van Halen were the top of the heap, and Edward had grown into this literally guitar hero when the moniker was really kind of new back then,